By statistics, if you go in 1975, that is roughly around 50 years back, among 5,000 kids, only one had autism. And by the time 2005, that is 30 years down the lane, it became 10 times more. Among 500 kids, one was autistic. And now in 2022, that is roughly just around 15 years after the last 2005 estimate, now it is roughly, I am saying, 1 in 50. It is even less than that in few areas, 1 in 44. So 1 in 50 means a small school class will have 50 students. So one is behaving like an autistic child. So this cannot be explained by true autism alone. So definitely a component of virtual autism has come up, which is adding a lot to the numbers. So now whether it is true autism or virtual autism, why we need to differentiate? Like I already said, because this is much treatable, less anxiety to the parents, and once you know the significant difference between true autism and virtual autism, your plan of action would also differ. Let me tell you some major differences between these two. Like first point is that, like we already discussed, most of the children with virtual autism are extremely fine till 1.5 years of age. By the time they are addicted to the screen, it is usually around 1.5 years, and this point is definitely there in the environment. And apart from this, they also have very poor outdoor exposure. Most of the time the parents are working parents, and it is very nuclear family, like both the parents and just the child, or at the maximum one grandparent. So this is a very small family with a poor exposure to the community or outdoors, especially in the post-COVID era. Most of the kids are coming with the same this thing and exposure. These three things would be there, and they were all okay till about 1.5 years, and then they have regressed. Although regression is a very important feature in autism, even the true autism, but here 100% of the times regression is there. That is the main difference. The second point, most of these kids are verbal, in the sense, I am not saying verbal in the sense of communication, but they know few words. They can hum the rhymes, or they can say the rhymes, or they can say all these A to Z numbers, colors, shapes, etc. But they are not using it to communicate with people most of the time. Third point, like in autism we say they are the social interaction or the joint attention is very poor. It is very difficult to get the interest of a autistic child towards us. But in these children with virtual autism, if you are engaging them in a very fun play, like something like a peekaboo, or you are throwing a cloth and removing and saying boo, or you are playing with balloons or bubbles or some squeaky toy, something which is catching their interest, you can get their attention very easily. Of course it will be fleeting, after some time again they will go back, but in that time when they are looking at you, they have got a very interested look on their face. This comes only by experience. Then the fourth point is that their visual responses are not so bad. What I mean by visual responses, mostly all the parents know that there is no good eye contact. That's why you have gone to doctor to ask what is this exactly. But here I am not talking about eye contact. What is a visual response I am talking is, if they are performing some activity or they are playing with some board or some toy, they are quite focused. Their visual tracking is quite good. Where is the toy, where is the pieces, how are they putting. Whereas in true autism, most of the time the visual responses are also not good. I mean, when they are doing an activity also, they are mostly staring off into spaces. It is very hard for them to keep the eyes tracked on a particular object. They are most of the time squinting like this, or looking at objects with different visual angles, and then they are vacantly looking at spaces, and they have to be reminded to look back at the board, and whatever is not in their field of vision, usually they don't bother about it. For example, if I am throwing a ball up, usually they don't try to follow where exactly it is going, whereas a virtual autistic child would be doing most of this by and large. Then fifth point is that these kids are mostly very manipulative. What I mean by this is, for example, if you have hidden the iPad somewhere in the upper shelf and they know that it is in the upper shelf, these kids can actually get the chair, they can get onto the top of the chair, they can pull all the clothes from there and take the iPad, or they can try to open the bolts and go out. So these kids are very manipulative because they know what exactly is happening, whereas a true autistic kid, especially in a very young age, usually tries to just push the adult to get the things he wants, but he won't be so manipulative. Then sixth point is that the pretend play or the imitation skills are not all that bad in these virtual autism kids. So we know that most of these kids, when we say do something, show me your eyes or raise your hand, they are not going to do it, but they are imitating the rhymes which they are seeing on the screen. If somebody on the screen is doing wheels on the bus, here they are also doing wheels on the bus, shh, 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 they are also doing shh, shh, shh. But when you ask, they might not be doing it. Whereas in a true autistic child, imitations are going to be largely problematic, especially in the very young age. They do not have much of gestures or imitations. This is one point. And in some cases of virtual autism kids, pretend play might have also developed, like they are if there is a 5 little monkeys rhyme is coming, here they are acting as if they are calling the doctor, or they are acting as if they are bathing a baby or feeding a baby. All this they are doing, but they are not doing it at our command. That is the difference. Whereas in a true autism, pretend play is very hard, because pretend play needs a lot of imagination, and what a true autistic child lacks is imagination. The seventh point is, both the children, true autism and virtual autism, may have some repetitive behaviors. Like when we ask parents what repetitive behaviors did you note, most of them by and large tell these 4 or 5 things, like they are either rotating in circles, or they are sometimes just flapping their hands when they are mostly excited, and thirdly they are either toe walking or sometimes head banging, and then they like to put all the things on the sofa or the bed, all the blocks, and let nobody touch it, or they are constantly just playing with the blocks in a similar fashion or lining them up. These are the 5, or jumping on the bed also is most of the time complaint, and some of them may be mouthing the objects. This is also one common this thing. So these are some of the very common repetitive behaviors told by parents with virtual autism kids, whereas in true autism cases there are much higher level of motor stereotypies, like their finger play is very typical, their visual responses or the visual stims are very high, and they are upset by loud noises. By what I mean by upset by loud noise, if they are upset because of one noise, like something like only mixie but not about anything, or only by crackers but not about any other sound, that may not be accounted, but they are by and large sensitive to a lot of sounds, and they are constantly closing their ears. It is not just that they are afraid, but they are closing their ears and making some abnormal cry kind of sounds also. That could be more significant. So the other forms of behaviors, like little bit of spinning, little bit of jumping, little bit of restlessness altogether, and their vestibular sensitivity is very hypersensitive. So they have this balance sense or very is not very good, and they have lot of fear about balancing or swinging, etc. Whereas the other side, the virtual autism kids are mostly seekers. They this actually, if you try to explain, they were always in the screen, so they have not really used their other senses in that evolving period, their touch and vestibular proprioceptive. So they are always seeking for that input in an abnormal way, like they are always doing something with the hand, or touching things and rubbing them, or jumping on the beds, etc. Whereas a true autistic kid would be having fear of heights, fear of fall, fear of anything which is rotating or moving in a to and fro motion, etc. Whereas the virtual autism kids actually kind of enjoy all these things. Although this is not an all or none rule, by and large I am saying. And then like I said already, most of the virtual autism kids, the play patterns are abnormal. I mean, they are not exactly playing like a child of their age, but they are good at most of these tabletop activities or some puzzle boards or those kind of thing which are of their interest. They are using their logic reasoning quite well and doing. Whereas in true autism cases, of course, if they are high functioning autism, they would be interested in puzzles, etc. But by and large, if they are intermediate functioning or low functioning autism, they would have a difficulty even in these kind of play also. And the last point is that most of these virtual autism kids are very impulsive, restless kids. They are constantly exploring the environment, what they will get, how to just take some or other toy and try to see what is it. But they are very impulsive, they are throwing the things, they can't wait, they are very impatient, etc. Whereas in a true autistic kid, his play is very I can say self-absorbed and limited to very few activities. He is not so curious. I mean, given a wide range of activities, maybe he will just choose one or two puzzles of his interest, and just he is doing it repeatedly. He is not very curious to explore the environment. So, by and large, these could be some of the differences between true autism and virtual autism, and like I said, it requires a lot of experience to differentiate between the two at the first go, but the differentiation is very, very important.